Today on Team Room Talk, part one of Ukrainian Week 2026 in Washington, D.C. Hi, this is Richard Davis, President and Advisor at Team Room More Hope and Growth, and today is going to be part one of Ukrainian Week 2026. There's a lot to be able to share about Ukrainian Week, so that's why I'm going to break this up into two different parts. So today I just want to be able to talk about some of the forums that I attended and the experience just being there. But it was a privilege to be asked to participate in Ukrainian Week. So a big shout out to Leo Regatta, who is also a pastor in Texas, but also serves with Hope International Ministries. And he invited me to be able to participate in the Trauma Healing Forum and being able to share on resiliency and faith. But you're going to hear more about that in part two of this topic. So it was a privilege. It was a privilege to attend Ukrainian Week and be able to meet so many people that have gathered, Ukrainians and Americans that have gathered for this shared purpose of faith and freedom. While here in the United States, we're celebrating 250 years of freedom and our liberty, Ukraine is celebrating their 35th year. So it was exciting to being able to talk about faith and freedom in this forum, but also just be able to hear from so many different Ukrainians on the work that's currently being taking place in Ukraine, but also being encouraged about what is also, despite the war, despite what is happening on the ground in Ukraine with this gross and unjust war that Russia has initiated. But just the resiliency of the people of Ukraine, the strength of the Ukrainian people for defending their faith, their liberty, their freedoms, the same values that we hold. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that they commented on during Ukrainian Week is that we're two different peoples, two nations, but we have the same vision. Here in the United States, our motto is faith, family, and freedom. And Ukraine, it's God, family, and Ukraine. And so we're very similar and to those regards as what we hold precious to us and when it comes to our liberties and our freedoms. And that's what Ukraine is trying to preserve for their own families, for their own future. And that's why they defend it so vigorously. Is what we would do here in the United States also, being able to defend against such aggressions. Here, though, I want to be able to take a little bit of time to be able to talk about the forums, which I had the privilege of being able to attend several of the forums throughout the week, being able to talk about, but also just the influence and the individuals that attended. So I spoke about Ukrainians showing up, which big shout out to a lot of my friends that showed up from Ukraine. So it was so good to see them, so many acquaintances that I have, people that I've met over the years since traveling to Ukraine, being able to see them again, be able to hug on their neck, just to be able to spend time with them was very, very encouraging, especially now knowing that the harsh weather conditions that Ukraine is facing, the constant attacks by Russia against the energy infrastructure in Ukraine and the civilian population centers. And so they took time away from their families, away from just being present with their families during this challenging time, to go to Washington, D.C., to be an advocate for the U.S. and Ukraine partnership and a continued support of the United States with Ukraine against these Russian aggressions, this invasion that Russia has undertaken. The forums were amazing. The individuals speaking, which we had politicians from the United States, we had diplomats from Ukraine, we had religious leaders, United States and Ukraine. We also had pastors, chaplains. We also had a lot of leaders from nonprofit organizations that are serving in Ukraine and being able to share. And these are nonprofit organizations in the United States and Ukraine, and they're talking about on the ground truths. So for me to be able to go there and to hear and to listen and to be able to talk with those for those firsthand accounts was very insightful. It was also very encouraging as I'm going to be sharing with you some of the stories that taken place, what I heard during the forums. So I have my notes out here. You'll see me looking down every now and then. But just be able to make sure I get it right because it's so important to be able to share these stories. But the bottom line up front, like we'd say in the military, what's the bluff? From there, the bottom line up front, it was very insightful. I'm very encouraged by the ongoing efforts that are taking place in the midst of war, that be able to support and to care for those in the communities, for the nation, for the people, and what's happening, but also be able to hear about the Americans that are standing up, the organizations here in the United States that are standing up and supporting Ukraine in their efforts to be able to maintain their sovereignty as a nation, their culture as a people, their language, their customs, but also as their identity as Ukrainians. And so it was a privilege to be able to just be there, to hear, to listen, be able to understand a little bit more, to be a better advocate myself, but also about what the ministry efforts that we will have coming up here soon, as I look forward to returning to Ukraine. So as Ukraine is fighting for their liberties on there, that same as we hold true dear to us, I just want to be able to share some of the mottos that we taken place. So here was part of the 250th anniversary of the United States and Faith and Freedom, and the 35th anniversary of Ukraine and Faith and Freedom. So they talked about two countries, one destiny, and it was faith and freedom. And so it was very powerful, because this Ukrainian week was bringing again a lot of religious leaders, but also just talking about from Christian principles. It was the Christian faith that we were focused on. No matter what the topic was, it was always going to be coming back and centering around the Christian faith and what we believe and what we hold dearly. So it was, again, just an incredible time in D.C. But first I want to cover some of the forums that I attended. The next one I will talk about more about what I participated in with the Trauma Healing Forum. But as I get ready to share a little bit of this, all my friends from Ukraine that showed up, and it was so incredible to be able to see them, to be able to spend some more time with them. And which I pray that when I get ready to go back to Ukraine in May, that I'll be able to see them once again, and being able to spend some more time, drink some coffee. We did get a lot of time of drinking some good coffee in Washington, D.C. On there is that we had a lot of the hotel coffee, or the coffee that was provided by the Museum of the Bible. But when you go into Ukraine, you can get some of those coffee shops, and they have incredible coffee. So I look forward to being able to spend some time with them. And hopefully we'll be able to hit some coffee shops and being able to just enjoy that time together. But as the forums that I attended the family and demography, the trauma and healing. That's going to be next on the next episode of Team Room Talk. I also attended a U.S.-Ukraine Veterans Forum, a U.S.-Ukraine Healthcare Forum, and a Humanitarian Forum. Now I went to the Ukrainian House on there, and I'm going to share a little bit about the memorial on the next episode. But I just wanted to just focus on these forums, even like the prayer breakfast. I'm going to share about that on the next video. But I just wanted to this time, today, just take a little bit of time and just talk about these forums, because again, it was just incredible information that was coming out. That one was very eye-opening, shocking, but also you hear some very encouraging information that's coming out. So one of the first ones that I attended was the Demography Forum. And I really enjoyed this one because of the truthfulness that was being presented on it. It's like they wasn't hiding anything in the facts about the decline in when it comes to birth. So I found we face the same thing here in the United States, with a lot of Western countries face a decline in population when it comes to birth rates. And Ukraine is experiencing this war where they had a lot of people that have left the country to seek asylum in other places, but now even within the country, just the low birth rates on there. But they're also just being able to talk about the incredible resiliency that's taking place in Ukraine as communities are coming together. Just kind of like here in the United States, where our communities exist and we know each other when we come into church and serving one another. But there, in the context of war, is it really brought the communities together to be able to focus on the needs of others, because they're all encountering the same thing when it comes to the shelling, the drones. It's really bringing the communities together to make sure that they support one another through this. I mean, we're talking 4 years now, no power, losing power for 7 hours when it comes to even trying to send kids to school, and you have constant shelling, you have constant drones that are coming in. So it's really brought about when it comes to the resiliency of the community and the family. But they did talk about the family. They talked about the epidemic of loneliness and how to try to reverse that. So even though as the communities are still coming together and they're still serving one another, the war has really brought about this epidemic of loneliness. And as a combat veteran, we would also be able to recognize that amongst our veteran population when it comes to loneliness, and how many veterans will retreat. They'll go into isolation because they're left with the residue of war and how it's impacted them. And so that's why the church is just so important, to be able to understand these areas and being able to talk with them, but being able to help them through that. And so Ukraine is recognizing that right now. They recognize and say, how do we turn around this epidemic of loneliness? Because here in the United States, we also know that when it comes to loss of purpose, identity, loneliness, isolation, it also leads to suicide. And so it is encouraging to see the openness in this topic, being able to recognize some of these markers, but also what is it that's needed to be able to reverse it. One, we know it's going to be the end of the war, but the second is going to be the focus on the family. On there. So they are really looking at how do they just being able to revitalize relationships within the family on there. And again, that the local church is going to be so needed in this endeavor, but it's great to see the government also taking steps on this. How do we really look at the rebuilding of the family, it's like with the husband, the wife, the children. How do you impact that in very positive areas when it comes to supporting the Ukrainian culture, when it comes to the communities, when it comes to everything that we see as the bedrock of society, as the family. So how are they impacting that? The next one that I attended was the Forum on Healthcare. And that was incredibly moving on there, because you had a Ukrainian and American doctors sharing stories of what's taking place on the ground in Ukraine on there. So they're sharing about the training, the educating of the doctors, getting them the medical experience that they needed, but also it's like you have some incredible doctors working on the ground in there, and how that they are able to accomplish so much in the midst of power outages and in the midst of trying to transplant organs. And so one of them was an account that was given was by Dr. Boris Todorov. I hope I pronounced that right, but Dr. Boris Todorov of the Heart Institute from the Ministry of Health in Ukraine. And he shared multiple stories. And he is an incredible surgeon in being able to do heart transplants, but he was sharing accounts from videos and personal testimony about doing a heart transplant in Ukraine, in Kyiv, while a missile attack is taking place, while drones are coming in, while power outages are occurring, and they have an open chest and they're trying to transplant a heart. So he shared about that, also shared about the challenges that is taking place of being able to transplant organs for extended time, because all the transportation is by ground now on there, but being able to move organs from one place to another to be able to get these transplants done is just incredibly insightful, but it's also very encouraging to see what advancements that Ukrainian medical care is being able to come up with, and being able to prolong how long that this organ can be here or transplanted before getting into the next medical facility where they can actually perform the operation, or even moving medical equipment and setting up so they can actually perform these surgeries, knowing that they're under a constant threat of attack all the time. But I tell you, it was incredibly moving accounts to hear of these surgeons, brave surgeons. I mean, Dr. Boris Todorov, he was in the ambulance transplanting organs on there. It's like his hands-on personal experience of not only doing the surgeries, but he's also one helping move equipment, set up equipment, his team, but also when it comes to transplanting organ or moving the organs themselves, transporting them within the country of Ukraine. But incredible of what they're able to accomplish. So as they recognize the value of their war fighters fighting for their freedoms, fighting for their liberties, fighting for their country, and giving their lives in the defense of Ukraine, is that the doctors there are working very hard to be under difficult conditions to be able to save lives of those that have been injured from the Russian attacks, because we know the attacks are going into population centers. You know, they're just not military targets. Russia's just attacking population centers, terrorism, to be honest and faithful to what is occurring in there. And these doctors are working so hard to be able to save lives, while the brave men and women of Ukraine are standing on the front lines trying to preserve that life, laying down their lives so others can live. But again, just an incredible account of what's taking place with their health care on there. So as attended the one that was the U.S.-Ukraine Veterans Forum, and it had a variety of topics and a variety of speakers, but there was a couple of them that really stood out to me. Yeah, just like the other ones, like when it comes to the health care, when it comes to the family. This one here in the U.S.-Ukraine Veterans Forum had a lot of different speakers, but the two that stood out the most to me was about the POWs. And also the demining operations that are currently taking place in Ukraine. So the Ukrainian POWs, they came and they shared stories of what it was like to be a captive under Russia control. So much so that they actually have a book that it's called, they cross out the word, the Geneva Convention, and they put in there the Moscow Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war. I would just need to read to you some of these accounts on here where you can be able to understand what they went through. I'm not going to read all of them, but I would encourage you to take a look. There is a MoscowConvention.com where you can find more information about the treatment of Ukrainian prisoners of war by Russia. But I just want to read a couple of them here from you for you on this episode here. But this is Article 26 on food. The basic daily ration consists of a portion of grits for breakfast, a leaf of raw cabbage for lunch, and fish entrails for dinner. At other times, prisoners of war may eat worms, rats, soap, and toothpaste. The time allocated for meals is 90 seconds. In case of violation of the norm, prisoners are beaten, deprived of food and sleep, and punished by being held in a punishment cell. You know, we hear so much about the rights of prisoners and those that have crossed the border illegally here in the United States. But I want you to listen to what Ukrainian prisoners of war are being exposed to on there, and how very little of this is being reported here in the United States. The basic daily ration consists of a portion of grits for breakfast, a leaf of raw cabbage for lunch, for dinner. 90 seconds. Don't finish in 90 seconds or put into. So that's one. I mean, there's many articles in this book. I encourage you to go to the website, MoscowConvention.com, to be able to just pick up a copy of this and to read more about it. But this is on recreation, studies, sports, and games. This is a testimony from Irina Stoney, a combat medic. In Kursk prison, we were also forced to constantly sing their songs and learn their poems. We would wake up at 6 a.m. to their anthem. We sang it as many as 15 times. Then we did exercises, had breakfast at 7 a.m., and then we were checked. Then we were lectured on Nazism. At 10 a.m., we did exercises again, 200 squats, 100 push-ups. Then we had lunch, read books, and retold what we had read. At 10 p.m., we had a stand down. Prisoners were actively forced to take Russian citizenship. Actively forced to take Russian citizenship. on there. And so it's like when you look at these stories that are taking place on here, and that's why again the book is it's crossed out Geneva Convention to the Moscow Convention on the Treatment of Prisoners. But on this one here, on Article 38 of Recreation, Studies, Sports, and Games, the detaining power shall encourage the practice of propaganda and violent imposition of its own culture. Its own culture, being Russian culture, can be violently imposed upon the other. On there, to avoid beating, prisoners are obliged to know the anthem of the detaining power, Russia, and to sing it at its first request of the warden. Read and recite the literature of the detaining power, Russian, again. Receive information about current events in the world exclusively from the sources of the detaining power. So that's what they're being subjected to. And so I had the privilege to be able to speak with the Ukrainian POW and to be able to get this book from him, to be able to learn more, because these are things that I don't. Even as I travel to Ukraine, I have met some POWs. Some are still struggling to be able to share their story on there. Others are starting to share their story, and they're collecting these stories to be able to get out into the world. So it was shocking. It was very eye-opening, especially as a combat veteran. That one that we know is like when it comes to handling those that would become prisoners of war, those that are taken from the battlefield, and the humane rights, being able to treat any injuries, being able to make sure that they're fed, that on there and taken care of, that they're treated properly. You know, they're interviewing. We don't interrogate, but interviewing on them. We know some issues had occurred in the past on there, but this is on a regular basis. This is what's happening to the Ukrainian prisoners of war that are taken into captivity by Russia. So again, eye-opening, disgusting on there, but this information needs to be able to get out, to be able to tell the story of what's really being shared. Because we often get a lot of disinformation on there, and they talk about that, and in or actually here a little bit, I'm going to talk about the humanitarian forum, but they talk about what many Americans are hearing through the news, and how it is disinformation. But that was just an incredible insight on there. But then it got into demining operations. This was very eye-opening again, because when you looked at World War II and all of Europe and the number of mines that were in place throughout Europe during World War II, Ukraine has more mines that have been placed inside of its country in a smaller area compared to World War II and all of Europe. Ukraine has more mines that have been placed in it. And so there are organizations that are working on demining that are approved, legally approved, to be able to do these operations, because it's very high risk. Matter of fact, one of the individuals, as a former Green Beret, that has his organization is doing demining operations. So he was speaking about the demining operations and the challenges that are being faced in Ukraine, especially when it comes to the woods. When power's out, when Russia keeps attacking the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure, people are going to go to the woods to be able to get firewood, to be able to heat their homes and be able to cook their meals. And yet that's where they're also finding a lot of mines. So one of the mottos that this young man, who was a former Green Beret, now serving in his own organization when it comes to demining, he says, your next step should not be your last. So it was very powerful. I got to talk with him afterwards, thank him for what he's doing. And also there's another Green Beret also that was there doing some other additional work, security work. And so we were able to talk about, just our former service and what we used to do is train, advise, and assist, being able to go forward in what we're doing. But it was a joy to be able to meet former brothers, Green Berets, that are currently serving in Ukraine and taking some of their skills and what they have learned, being able to share and to be able to develop and lead a demining organization. Because he also shared that what they're also finding is that there's booby traps being left behind So besides the number of mines and the constant remining of cleared areas by drones, is that they're also finding like a mortar round up in a tree that was camouflaged, so it would be hidden, but as a tree grow or something would shake it out, it could potentially kill someone. So they're leaving behind booby traps in areas that they formerly occupied, that Ukraine has regained on there, and they're finding all these issues that are coming through with it. So not only when it comes into the demining, but also when it comes into restoring the land, because it's just so much, the bombardments, the mining, everything. And so after Russia has been forced out of some areas, is that they now have to be able to revitalize the land, being able to continue growing crops. So you're going to hear more about that on the humanitarian. But that was a very insightful one, being able to talk about, is be able to listen to what's happening. So many different organizations that are going there, so many different leaders that are speaking at these forums. And then there was a humanitarian forum, and again, this one was set up with a lot of different topics, a lot of different speakers, and what was taking place on there. But one of the biggest ones that was there was about the Russian. Well, I'm watching deer run through the property. But what was one of the biggest and most insightful ones was the attacks on religious freedom in the occupied areas. We don't hear about it a lot. Oftentimes here in America, we hear news about how Ukraine is the one who is attacking religious freedoms on there, because of the Russian Orthodox churches are giving away troop displacements and positions and strengths on here. But you don't hear about what's occurring in the occupied areas. And so they had individuals, pastors, who were in the occupied areas come and speak. And they did. And I was able to go up and speak to one of the pastors, who's actually featured in a Kyiv independent film that was released. And it's called No God But Theirs. And that he was one of those pastors that was forced to leave his area where his church was at, his congregation was at. And he just prays that one day he'll be able to return and continue serving. But in this film, they talk about the disinformation that Americans are getting. And they're even talking about politicians and media personalities that continue to spread the same disinformation when it comes to religious freedom in Ukraine and what's happening. So I was able to listen to his stories and talk with him, in which I was able to get some magazines on there to be able to continue reading. These are topics that I'm interested in, because it helps me to be able to better understand, but also being able to serve the Ukrainian brothers and sisters when I travel. But to be able to get these accounts and to hear them and what's going on, which you can find more on this information, this topic on Mission Eurasia. You'll be able to, I'll have the link with that provided, but you'll be able to find the same information. But it's very eye-opening on there when it talks about even the film itself. We watched it when I got back from Ukrainian week. My wife and I, we sat down, we watched it. It's available on YouTube, and we are able to watch this account. Again, one of the pastors that I spoke to is featured in that film as he's sharing his what he encountered when the Russian soldiers occupied the area, took over his church, forced him to leave. And many congregants have left. Many of them pray to be able to return to their home, to be able to continue worshiping in faith as they practice, as Protestants, being able to practice what their beliefs are. So my time there in Ukrainian week was incredible on there. What I was able to hear, people I was able to meet, the networking that took place, but also just being able to listen to hear what is happening by Ukrainians and what they're encountering. Even with my travels, I see and I've been able to listen, but this was a unique experience, because now we're also hearing from organizations that have a lot more visibility in and where they're traveling and what they're doing, like the humanitarian. There are organizations that are taking millions and millions of meals to civilians near the front lines that are struggling to be able to get support, supplies, get meals. And these organizations, nonprofits, they are taking, it's like millions of meals and being able to distribute them to people in need. And now with the extreme cold weather and what's happening, it's saving lives. And so they are risking themselves and piling up trucks full of goods, of meals, and being able to distribute to those are suffering. Suffering because of the continued onslaught, Russian artillery, drones, missile strikes on there, being able to continue lifting up the spirits of those that are near the front lines or on the front lines with their homes being shattered, and just waiting for this war to end, for Ukraine's victory to be able to start rebuilding their country. And that's what their focus of and what they're desiring. And so it was a very encouraging week. The next, or part 2 of this video, I'm going to share more about the Trauma Healing Forum that I took part in and some of the other panel discussions that I took part in. But I just wanted to just open up this first part by the incredible speakers that I was able to listen to, all the different forums, the different topics, traveling, going to the memorial. You're going to hear about that in the next part. But also being able to spend some time at the Ukrainian house in Washington, D.C., and to be able to meet so many incredible individuals, to be able to see my friends as they flew in from Ukraine, to be able to spend some time with them, but also so many others that I know that are serving there in Ukraine also. So it was truly a blessing to be able to be a part of that. And I thank you for supporting Team Room More Hope and Growth, because through your generous donations that allowed me to be able to participate in that event, to be able to go, to be able to speak and being able to share, but also most importantly to be present, to support, show that support for our Ukrainian brothers and sisters, but also to learn, to be able to learn what's really happening there on the ground. So overall, again, bottom line up front, it was an incredible week. 2 people, 2 nations, 1 shared vision: faith, family, freedom. So thank you, take care, God bless, and keep watching for part 2 of my time in Washington, D.C. for Ukrainian Week.